Emily's mom said 24. Now Emily, who was 35, nearly fainted on the spot. When the woman left, Emily asked her mom, "Why'd you tell such a whopper of a lie?" Emily, her mother, replied, "I've been lying about my age for so long, it suddenly dawned on me I have to start lying about your age too." Mothers, it's hard to overestimate the value of a mother, and we don't do enough to recognize them and thank moms for who they are and what they do. So it is nice to have a day where we at least attempt to do those things, to value them and express our appreciation. Now, for the sake of Mother's Day, we will take a break from our study in the book of Numbers. I figured that a plague going out amongst the Israelites because of their disobedience was not the theme for the day. But ultimately, we will capitalize on the fact that Moses has been a central figure in our study in the book of Numbers. And there is a penchant in our society for prequels, in terms of where things come from, what happened before these events. And so therefore, we're going to turn to Exodus chapter 2 and get the backstory of this great man. In fact, when we think about Moses, Moses is one of the greatest men that have ever lived. Let me just go out there and say that. He's certainly behind Jesus and maybe some others, but when you think about all the interaction that he had with God, just the personal nature of his relationship with God, what that meant about what God thought about Moses, and trusting him with his people for such a long time. And so basically, in looking at Moses' backstory, we will be introduced to his mom, who ultimately, many of us may even know, saved his life by virtue of her bravery and her faith. So, if you're in Exodus chapter 2, let me get there. We're going to start reading in verses 1 through 4. It says, "Now a man of the house of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus-based basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him." Now all these are it's very compelling information here in terms of what it shares about Moses and about Moses' mom. But for those of you that don't know the story of what precedes this, what made this necessary, I would just ask those who know the story, be patient with me as I tell it in terms of bringing us up to speed for what happened. Ultimately, it really starts in terms of why Moses' mom needed to do this. It really starts with the book of Genesis at the end there. Ultimately, if you're aware of the Bible reading program we have on our website, lhcc.info, just recently we finished the book of Genesis. And the book of Genesis finishes really with the people of Israel in Egypt under Pharaoh's protection and under Pharaoh's blessing. And if you remember that Joseph, who was Jewish, became a leader in Pharaoh's court and ultimately saved Egypt. Egypt would have been no more, would have been decimated if it wasn't for Joseph interpreting in a dream and knowing that he had to store food during 7 years of plenty, so that ultimately when 7 years of famine and all the other nations of the world were affected in drastic ways, that ultimately Egypt was saved. Now we know that Jacob, the father of the Israelites, the father of the Jews, ultimately, certainly Abraham, but then Jacob being Abraham's grandson. But anyway, he comes down to Egypt. And so basically with Joseph's family, because of the wisdom that Joseph had and the value that Pharaoh saw in him, that ultimately, again, they're blessed, they're provided for. What job do you want to do? In what part of the land? Go in the best land, he tells the Jewish people. Well, basically, Exodus now starts with saying that a Pharaoh has come to the throne that doesn't know Joseph, that doesn't remember all that he did. And he looks at Goshen, he looks at all these Jewish people that are just so numerous now. He starts getting concerned about how they might be used against Egypt. And ultimately, if we're attacked by an enemy and they join that enemy, they might actually work against us. So he does 3 things to address this population problem that he sees amongst the Jewish people. One is he enslaves them. He puts them under harsh taskmasters. 2, he goes to the midwives that are dealing with Hebrew births and telling them, if a Hebrew woman has a boy, kill him. If it's a girl, it's okay if you let her live. And then when the midwives don't follow through and do that, that ultimately tells all of Egypt, all Egyptians, you have a right when it comes to a Hebrew child. If it's a boy, you can throw him in the Nile, and if it's a girl, it's okay if you let her live. Well, there's also two important points that come out of this. First of all is that no effort of man can ever thwart the plan of God. That ultimately, even though Pharaoh comes up with these three tactics, none of them work. Puts them on the taskmaster, they continue to increase. So he gives his directions to the midwives, and the midwives don't do what he said, but ultimately the Jews just continue to increase. And even after he directs the Egyptians to do this, they just continue to multiply. Where God chooses to bless, where God chooses to move, where God chooses to transform, there's nothing that anyone can do. I mean, maybe the individual whose free will needs to cooperate with God, like you can stop God's will in your life, but if He's doing something over here with His people, and He has a desire and a plan, nothing that someone else can do can thwart that plan. I also love the story of the Hebrew midwives who feared God more than Pharaoh. Because ultimately, these were women that did not have children of their own. It actually says that by virtue of their obedience and their fearing God more than Pharaoh, God blessed them with families. But before they did this, they had no children of their own. But what did they do? They protected those children. They protected children that weren't their own. This does speak to me, to women who, maybe your children are all grown and you don't feel like there's any just a place or area where that mothering and nurturing and protective instinct could be expressed. Maybe you don't have any grandchildren that are local. Well, you know something? There's always a place for you to care for children. There's always a place in God's purpose where He's the one, you're the one that God desires to be the protector, to be the teacher, to be the one that comes along the side of a child to nurture them and raise them up with independent of the circumstance they're in terms of how God might use you. And even more so for those ladies, again, who have always wanted children and it's just never happened. Just realize that there's a message for you in this context in terms of what God has for you, in terms of expressing your motherly concerns for another child. But now consider the faith and bravery of Moses' mom. I mean, make note that she and her husband are from the tribe of Levi, the priestly tribe. Also recognize that she is both following and defying the edict of Pharaoh. I mean, ultimately, maybe if she got caught, she could say, I'm doing what he said. I'm putting him in the Nile. I just am doing it like a mother would, not like a Pharaoh would. I'm protecting him. I'm making this boat. I mean, it's actually interesting. The word that is used in the Hebrew is the same word that's used for the ark of Noah. And so ultimately, in the same way that God protected Noah and his family in the big ark, He's protecting Moses in this little ark that is a place of safety and provision for him. But again, it's Moses' mom that has the faith and the courage to do that. I mean, ultimately, her life is in jeopardy because of this. She's ultimately risking herself for that. But ultimately, we know that the protective and nurturing instinct of a mother is renowned in all creation. Mothers take on a whole new persona, a whole new energy and motivation when it comes to protecting their young. You know, basically, you know, I hear my wife always say, don't mess with my kids. You know, you can mess with me, but don't mess with my kids, because that protective instinct always comes out in her. Well, I think in today's society, we may not have to float your child on a river to protect them, but you certainly need to protect and nurture them in other ways. And I tell you, their need for protection will only grow as society continues to decline in moral relativity and moral depravity. As society moves further away from regard for God and awareness and adherence to His standards that He set up for our protection, as society moves away from that and now kids are subject to far greater evil, far greater sin, you have to be the means of protection. God gave us His laws, God gave us His standards so we could protect ourselves. So as the world deteriorates, that ultimately we as parents and you as moms certainly need to be that instrument of protection. Now, I think there are three main areas that I see where protection is needed. The most essential things that I see that's coming against Christianity, coming against faith, and what we need to do in terms of raising our children in the fear and admonition of the Lord. I think the first is in the area of subjectivity. Now, what do I mean by that? What do I mean by the tendency that society has to be subjective in nature? It is a tendency in the world to define things based on individual perception, where they are the subject. Things are true or things are not true because of what I think and how I perceive things. No one can come along and tell me that what I think is wrong if what I'm doing is not harmful to you. I mean, that is the tenor and tone of our society. Really, it started in the 60s with the whole, if it feels good, then do it. You know, that was the predominant statement in terms of defining a subjective approach, where generations before that were objective in nature. It's about a standard that's out there that we need to adhere to, a standard that is true regardless of what you think or regardless of what you feel. Because isn't that the nature of faith? Isn't that the nature of what God is calling us to? Isn't that the nature of the Word? That ultimately God reveals something. There's a standard out there, and we need to apply that. We need to live in that. We need to follow that, regardless of what you think. I don't care how you woke up in the morning. I don't care what you're feeling today. This is truth, and there's nothing you can do to argue or doubt or come against it in terms of making it not true. But ultimately, when we recognize just a pervasive way that we as human beings, we as Americans, I think our souls have been corrupted in terms of our own assessment, the way we rationalize and justify things based on my needs or my wants or my comfort or my feeling. See, the minute that think about the way you make decisions. The minute you think of yourself first in making a decision, you're being subjective in nature. The minute you think of, there's a prayer breakfast this Saturday, let me check my schedule. Let me think about how I feel about that. Let me think about, boy, do I really want to get up and whatever you would say, rather than saying, boy, would God want His people to come together and pray? Yeah, probably. Would He want them? I can't deal with men, right? It's Mother's Day. There's a women's Bible study on Tuesday. This applies for men, for Bible study appointment. But anyway, there's a women's Bible study on Tuesday night. Do you think God would want me to go? See, the minute we assess that based on, I'm not sure if I like the people there, I don't think that's really important, I'm too busy. At what point do we say that, again, we understand that the Christian life is intended to be objective. It doesn't matter what I think. But see, we live in a society that lives based on that. It's all about how are you affected and what's the impact on you, and if it's too dangerous or too uncomfortable, don't go there. Well, you know something? You will never get to God. If you're an unbeliever this morning, you've never come to that point of believing in Jesus in terms of the cross, in terms of the forgiveness that's available and the forgiveness that you need. If you make a subjective analysis of that, you'll actually go one of two ways. You'll either say to yourself that, hey, there's something, I feel like I'm good enough. I feel like I'm better than these other people, so you know something, why do I need salvation? Why do I need the cross? Or you'll make a subjective analysis and say, I'm more evil than anyone else. There's no hope for me. I'm too broken. God would never accept me. See, again, the minute you make a subjective analysis, then ultimately you'll never get to the objective truth that God is righteous, God is love, God has a standard for you to join Him in, to have the privilege to follow. I think it's important for us as believers to distinguish between being judgmental and making a righteous judgment. See, in other words, and again, I'm thinking of you moms as you're teaching your kids, as again, you're raising them up in the fear and admonition of the Lord. It's important for us to distinguish between making a righteous judgment and being judgmental. See, judgmental is making my relationship conditional to how someone is following the truth. but it doesn't change how I define the truth. So in other words, to be raising our kids to understand that this is the truth, there is a standard, so to make a righteous judgment, to say this is wrong or this is right, that this is sin or this isn't, that again, we can't lose that in terms of what the Bible calls us to. I do believe that, the issue of homosexuality and transgender is the primary means that the kingdom of darkness is using in a subjective assessment, in a subjective analysis of our lives, to say, well, something, they're not hurting anyone, or they're not bad people, or whatever. But something, when the Bible just tells us this or that, that's what we have to believe, and that's what we have to follow. Again, objective in nature, not subjective. And moms, you need to be aware of that as you're ultimately dealing with your kids. Now, ultimately, when we're dealing with people struggling with homosexuality or struggling with... We've talked about this in the past. We approach them with love and compassion. We don't judge them, but in the back of our minds to be saying, boy, am I doing things that are approving this, that's supporting this, that make people think that it's good? I've used the analogy of, if you're dealing with someone that's smoking, what do you say to them? Do you say words that say, yeah, you go, girl, you go, guy, keep puffing? I'm glad that satisfies you. Are you happy smoking? Well, good, I'm glad you're happy smoking. You keep doing that, because that makes you happy. We don't do that, right? Now, the person that's smoking, they might think, hey, I'm not hurting anyone. I have a right to do this. This is fine with me. But you see, so in the same way as you engage with things that, again, the Bible addresses, this is not my opinion. I have no right to judge anyone, because I might be able to point out something that's wrong in terms of what you're doing, and you can point out to me things that I'm doing that are wrong that I'm doing. And so therefore, I am a broken person trying to reveal your brokenness. But if you don't follow that, if you don't want to believe that, then fine. That doesn't need to change the way I deal with you, how I interact with you. But again, I still, particularly in terms of the standards that are in our hearts, it has to be objective in nature. I think the second thing that will be increasingly important and difficult to protect, the first is, again, that whole idea of subjectivity, is that it's going to be difficult to protect purity. Ultimately, the world is robbing the innocence of children on various levels, introducing and forcing conversations that don't need to happen, and perverting God's gift of sex in various ways. Today, it is practically laughable to suggest that someone wait before marriage before they have sex. My generation, it was pretty laughable then. Like when we were in high school, but I think in many ways, we were just talking the talk, like we're just, hey, something, I've been here, I've done this, or whatever, because I'm cool, or whatever. But in the back of our minds, at least, was, something, we know that this is wrong. Mom and Dad at least say this is wrong. Maybe I know the God that says that this is wrong. But there was still some semblance of purity or an idea of what a standard is. Something, the more and more of the world goes away from that, and what our kids are subjected to because of that, 6th graders, 8th graders, conversations they're having in school, the things they're forced to confront. Again, you have to be vigilant in terms of being a mother, in terms of protecting that and reminding them of why God says that. And remember, I'm just going to, just for the sake of time, you always have to remember 1 Corinthians 6:18 when it comes to this whole idea of purity. It says that all of the sins man does outside of his body, but a sexual sin is done against himself. And that's you women too, by the way. Himself, ourselves, human beings. That ultimately we understand that if you rob a bank, or you rob someone, or you kill someone, it's pretty clear who suffers the consequences of that, right? The guy who stole something, got something stolen from, and the person that you killed, they bear the consequence. Now when it comes to sex, it seems like no one's getting hurt. See, that's the problem. We have a world just going all these places because this is fun, this is gratifying, this is cool, or it's just what everyone is doing, this is what my body is telling me to do, so let me go do that. But you know something? In the end, what God is telling you is you will destroy yourself. See, so in the way that you would say, boy, this isn't right. It's not hurting anyone out there. It's hurting you in terms of what it's doing to your body, what it's doing to your soul. So again, Mom, you care about protecting your kids, right? You're vigilant about that in terms of making sure that they're protected from the evil and the darkness that would come against them. So again, purity, just realize the challenge that exists for you and how passionate you need to pursue that. I think the third thing to protect in terms of your children is to protect hope. I don't know that there's ever been a time in our society when the younger generation doesn't have hope. But don't you see that? Don't you see that in terms of the way kids operate? The way they're thinking? Kids just 15-year-olds committing suicide, 10-year-olds committing... What? I mean, how can a child come to the assessment that the best solution to the problems that I'm facing is to just end it all? But you know something? More and more we see that happen, more and more we will see it happen, because what we find is a younger generation looks at the older generation and say, what are you basing your hope on? What are you seeking? What is your purpose? What are you living for? And they see what they're living for, and they say to themselves, well, that's kind of boring, or that's not important, or that really doesn't move my will. That really doesn't address the needs of the moment or what I'm struggling with in terms of my life. So if that's your answer, then I'm just living to go on vacation, or I want a bigger house, or whatever. Well, that's not worth the fact that my girlfriend broke up with me, or I'm mad at this person, or whatever depression I might be dealing with. So we have to recognize one of the greatest things that God gives us as human beings is hope, a positive expectation of the future. And ultimately, we as parents, you as moms, need to live in that hope in terms of what positive expectation it provides for you. That ultimately you're not living for yourself. You're not living for this world. That you're living for a kingdom and a God that is beyond all things, that has solutions and provisions and promise for every circumstance of life, that it's all good. You know, we think, independent of any situation we face, any problem you come against, there is always an answer, there's always a direction, there's always a provision, there's always a presence, there's always some place to turn. So you see, that's the way we approach life. See, Jesus said to us, don't worry about tomorrow, because today has enough problems of its own. Let me worry about tomorrow. You just take care of the things today that I would want you to take care of today to maximize the potential for tomorrow. But let me take care of that. And so as we think about what that means of God taking care of tomorrow, is that a fearful thing? Is that a sad thing? Or is that a hopeful thing? Is that a joyful thing? Is that a peaceful thing? See, that's what it's intended to be. But see, kids are losing that because parents don't have that. And we have to be harbinger of that hope. Hope, see, what does the Bible say? Without a vision, people what? They perish. And we have a younger generation perishing in death, perishing in drugs, perishing in alcohol because they don't have a vision. And ultimately, hope is that vision. And that's what we as parents, that's what we as moms, you as moms, I can't say we as you as moms, bring to your kids. There's a hope, there's a purpose, there's a plan, there's something driving us forward. There's a better tomorrow in terms of God's economy. But ultimately, just to close very quickly, because we do have communion today, just look at Moses' mom's faith. Then, and really more so what God does. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her slave girl to get it. She opened his throat, saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew babies, she said. You know, at this point, in terms of storytelling, this is a point of conflict, by the way. I mean, if there's anyone more likely to throw this baby into the Nile, guess who it is? Pharaoh's daughter. All right, so now, in other words, if you don't read verse 7, You say, whoa, wait a minute. The Pharaoh's daughter is finding this baby. She's supposed to, my father said, well, look at what happens. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? Yes, go, she answered. And the girl went and got the baby's mother. That's Moses' mom. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I'll pay you. What? I mean, do you see the hand of God there? Do you, boy, what good coincidence. Wasn't it fortuitous that the daughter was there and suggested this? I mean, this is the work of God all over it, all over the place, where Moses' mom is going to do the very thing she wanted to do in the first place, but now she's going to be paid by the enemy to do it. The guy who's trying to destroy babies, he's going to pay, through his daughter, to take care of Moses. And so, ultimately, moms, when you think about hope, you think about faith, you think about what you're trying to protect your kids from, what you're trying to draw them into, it's that kind of God. It's that vision of God. It's that power of God. It's that plan of God to say God can work out things in the worst of circumstances and bring them to an end that is all about Him and what He's doing, and ultimately have the privilege of leading our children into that. So let's bow and let's pray. Father, we just do come before you and just thank you for just the example that this mother shows in terms of her not operating subjectively, not looking at the environment and saying, well, what if I do this, I might get killed. She's thinking of your plan. She's thinking of the way that would define her and protect her baby the most. And Father, we just thank you for the principles we find in your word that shows us how to protect our kids, the things that are most dangerous or corrupting in terms of our society. And so, Father, I just pray that this day just continue to be an encouragement to moms, but ultimately to be challenged with the things that you're leading them to in terms of being the protector and the nurturer of their kids. It's in your Son, Jesus Christ's name, we do pray. Amen.